do my own hair like this. My friend did it. She was in town. We had an engagement party. I'm so like, I feel like I don't know what day it is. It's just been like a bus, club, another club, next place, but it's all been good. If I sound a little sick, I don't feel sick at all. I don't know if it's from talking so much or having more alcohol than I normally do. I don't know what it is. I just like sound a little rough, but I don't feel anything. This is new. That guy's new. What? Where did I get that? Michael's Craft Store. Are they evil? Hopefully not. I know Hobby Lobby is, because I almost went to Hobby Lobby, and then I was like, oh, right, it's evil. And then there was a Michael's not far, so that was a quick one. So I will be honest with you. I am violently unprepared tonight. Are the slides prepared? Yes. Yes, they are. Have I done a good job of making any memes or reading through them? No, I haven't. But we're going to learn some interesting stuff tonight. Tonight's going to be another, let me make sure I have the game. Yeah, I do have the game. Tonight's going to be another, remember how when I talked about the 1960s, I was like, there's a bunch of different stuff here that we could talk about with like counterculture and the women's liberation movement and stuff like that, and we wrote some of it down. This is going to be the 70s version of that, and it's going to be much more depressing. So when we did the 1960s, it was like, oh my God, the boomers were hippies, everything's cool. And now we're doing the 1970s, and it's like, oh my God, why is everyone reacting like that? So a lot of the stuff we're going to touch on tonight could be its own stream. Some of it already has been. Watergate's in here. Stuff about the Vietnam War is in here, because the Vietnam War literally lasted for fucking ever. Yeah, I think it'll be a grand old time. Society and transition. I'm going to take my hair out a little bit and catch up in the chat. Lemur Banana, thank you for subscribing for 27 months. Oh my God, it literally is so curly. I kind of love when that happens. I'm having a bad mental health day. We'll get through it together. Grand Fam subscribed for 12 months. Tiny Ginger subscribed. So many subscribers tonight. Let's give it up for our subscribers. Love that for us. Let me go on Do Not Disturb. What else was I going to say? Oh, I had people staying at my house. Then I stayed at somebody else's house last night, and then I drove home today, and we were supposed to record Teacher Quit Talk today, but then we were having technical difficulties, so we just kind of had a Teacher Quit Talk meeting instead and talked about like our schedule and the guests that we're going to have and things like that. So like all in all, doing great. Everything's fabulous, but I'm just like very out of sorts. I also have barely been exercising and have kind of been eating like garbage. Not even in like a, oh, I don't deserve to eat yummy food way, just in like a, oh, my body feels like garbage when I eat buffalo chicken tenders and mac and cheese at every single meal, which unfortunately is still happening. I feel like I look like Kristen Doty with my hair like this, and I'm kind of living for it. All because I mentioned you might start Cameo to yell at men. Oh my God, I have that to do too. A Dutch Bros parking lot. Thank you for subscribing with Prime. I was so sad when we were in Nashville. It just didn't work out for me to try Dutch Bros. We were never near one, even close, like at all. And then when we were on the way out of town, we thought about going, but I had literally just drank a coffee and was about to be in the car, so I didn't want to be like super anxious because I already like don't really like sitting in the car like that. So it didn't work out for me to try it, but I want to try it so bad, and I've never tried it. I did try 7 Brew for the first time the other day, and I was like, oh, this is very good. It definitely felt like a dessert more than like a coffee you could do every day or anything, but it was good. There's not one near me at all, but I had to run an errand far away, and there was one over there, so I was like, and by an errand, I mean what I'm always doing, driving hours away from Facebook Marketplace. My true passion in life. Meeting a 13-year-old Yorkie at my local shelter tomorrow. Might adopt if it's the right fit for both of us. Aw, I wish I was like a good pet person. Like I'm just not. I would love to be, but it's just not in me. Are you off from teaching for the summer? Yeah, and I had so many things I wanted to accomplish this summer, and now summer's almost over, and I've accomplished almost none of them. So that's good. I need to get some papers notarized. That didn't happen today. I did get an oil change today. That's something. Give it up. I got an espresso machine today. I feel like a new woman. I love the Nespresso machine, and my family always gets very upset at me over this because lots of members of my family have like real espresso machines. Like one of my family members has one that like dead ass restaurants buy. Like they had to buy it from a special place. And then someone else has, it's like a Miele or something like that. That's like for people's homes, but it's like the top end. And I always say, I think mine is better. Like the Nespresso is better. Is it terrible for the environment? Yeah. Are they contributing to planned obsolescence and it breaks every single year? Yes. Is it fucking delicious? Absolutely. every single time. It hits every single time. And my family's always like, yours is not as good. And I'm like, it's literally just better. It's better. And whenever anyone comes to my house, they always tear it up. So not tear it up in a bad way. I just mean like they like it. It tastes good to them. I like the 7 Brew Pixie Stick Refresher. What did I have from them? I think I had like a cinnamon roll latte because I was there in the afternoon and like normally my go-to is like an iced vanilla latte, but their menu had like a lot of things that sounded good to me. So I was like, I kind of want to get something adventurous because like when in Rome, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to, like I'm all the way at 7 Brew. I don't want to just get my normal shit that I make at home every day. Like I want to, what do y'all specialize in? And I literally asked her, I was like, what do people like? And she told me one was like, kind of boring sounding, and the other one was the cinnamon roll one, and I was like, yeah, I'll do the cinnamon roll one. That sounds good. I was gifted a high-tech Nespresso machine, and I can't figure out how to make a good cup of coffee. I think it's called the Vertuo. It was like $120, I think, and it's like the circle pods, and then you... Not the little tiny pods that are like that big. It's the bigger ones that are like that big. Okay, so now that we've been talking about my Nespresso machine for 6 minutes and 28 seconds, let's talk about the 1970s. We actually have a lot of slides to go through tonight. A lot of this stuff I'm very familiar with. I talk about it with my students, and then a lot of this stuff you'll see like was kind of added in that is newer to me, and like I said, this is not going to be super detailed about every single thing. It's just going to be an overview of kind of the era and what was going on politically. So the main like mindset I want to put you in, if you were not here for our 1960s one, which was not last week, it was the week before. I'm terrible at planning, I know. If you were not here for that, the 1960s was an era of a lot of social change. There was a lot of civil rights activity. There was a lot of anti-Vietnam War sentiment. There was a lot of like women's liberation sentiment. This is also when like Woodstock happened and like the hippies and the summer of love and kind of changing sexual norms and changing gender norms, people getting married later. Like it was just a time of a lot of change for, I guess, what we would consider like woke, but just as, you know what I'm trying to say. So, what was I saying? So 1960s is an era of a lot of change and a lot of like progressivism on social issues. So the 1970s, we see kind of like a backlash to that. And we see like a rise in conservatism, and a lot of political changes happened in the 1970s, particularly around the right and Republicans and how they came to be who they are today, I'll say. This is not going to be like a history up to today, but I think the 1970s really show like the early days of what our current Republican Party is. Like this is them laying the groundwork for what we're experiencing today. So very relevant. So one of the issues at the time was declining public trust. A couple of these slides, not all of them, but some of them are from the AP shop on Teachers Pay Teachers. I love their slides. I use them with my class all the time. So a couple of these I've used in class, but most of them I never have. So anyway, but they do great work. 10 out of 10 recommend them, and they have tons of good reviews. And this is not sponsored at all. Like I didn't even approach them being like, can I have it for free? Like I literally put it on my personal, like this is like I bought it for my class years ago, and then now occasionally I'm like, oh, let me pop that in here because I bought it with my money, so it is mine. So anyway, in the 1970s, public confidence and trust in the government's ability to solve social and economic problems declined. So you can see this is like an average of like trust. You can't really tell what's on this graph. But anyway, the shit's going down because there's a lot of economic challenges and political scandals and foreign policy crises. So in the 60s, people had a little more faith in their government to like get shit done. And then keep in mind, like World War II, people were like, wow, the government got so much done. And then they built all the highways and they were like, the government's doing so much. So people kind of liked the government. And then now in the 70s, they're kind of like, oh, maybe you guys are actual idiots and I don't like the government. Which again, like I was telling you, like feels very like the foundation of today. So we talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago, the credibility gap. The credibility gap basically just means people don't find you credible. There's a gap between what you're saying and what we are seeing in front of our own eyes, on the news, in reports, in newspapers, whatever. A random question, what history textbook do you use with your kids? I don't use a textbook with them. I tell them as like a supplemental if they miss class or need more information. The American Yap is really good. I have in my classroom, like, I can't remember what they're called because we barely use them, but I do have some textbooks. I don't have a full set. They're decent. I don't love them. I find them to be very wordy and hard to understand, and not hard to understand in a way that it's like teaching you more about history. It's just written in a way that's difficult to understand. So in lieu of a textbook, what I use primarily for APUSH is primary sources. Catherine Brown has like tons of collections of them, primary and secondary, and like that's primarily their source reading. And then, like I said, the American Yap I give to them is like, here, if you want more support with this or whatever. But yeah, hope that was helpful. Missed this week in my history class, so I'm excited for this. So anyway, the credibility gap, I love how my bra is bigger than my shirt. Perfect. The credibility gap widened after the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive was an incident in the Vietnam War where like a whole bunch of people died. And LBJ's withdrawal from the 1968 election, because LBJ was running and then was like, never mind. Nixon's victory on the promise of peace with honor was seen as hollow when he expanded the Vietnam War into Laos, and Cambodia. So we've talked about this a lot when we talked about Vietnam War on here, if you were here for that. And basically the Vietnam War was super fucking long and the government just like kept fucking lying about it. Like Nixon was like, I'm going to be president and I'm going to be like, I'm going to do so much and we're going to have peace in Vietnam. And then he like expanded the war and continued the draft and continued bombings and peace. So that's the credibility gap. People are just like, you're like, what the fuck, man? Which years do you teach in APUSH? Sorry, I never took it. Do I know off the top of my head? It goes from like, the first thing we learn about is like a map of like the indigenous tribes and their farming methods, like starting in, I believe, like very olden times, like the Mayas and the Incas all the way in South America. But they don't know like those dates. They don't have to memorize like, you know, because it's more general time periods. And then it ends. The last thing I teach them is like, the last thing is like current issues or whatever, which is mainly, we talk about like the recession of 2008 and like environmentalism and things like that. So like pretty much all of them is the answer I guess I have for that. I'm very distracted tonight. So the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers, I'd always heard people talk about the Pentagon Papers, but I didn't really feel like I had the best grasp of like what exactly is the fucking Pentagon Papers. But the Pentagon Papers were leaked by this guy, Daniel Ellsberg, and they revealed the extent to which the U.S. government had been lying to the American people. So Vietnam, they basically ordered a report on Vietnam because at this point, it's the 70s. We've been in Vietnam for like 15 years at this point. And so they were like, let's get like all this information about the history of our involvement in Vietnam. Because keep in mind, we get a new president like pretty frequently in the United States. So they wanted like a complete report of like what's the situation in Vietnam? Like, is this a winnable war? Is this something that we should be involved in? Like, who's on our side? Who's against our side? And again, like the Vietnam War, I've done many streams about it. It's so complicated. And I just recently learned a ton more about it from like a more like the history of the political issues in Vietnam prior to U.S. arrival perspective. So they get this giant report about Vietnam. And it's basically like, you're fucked. Like, it's hundreds of pages, I think. But the crux of it is like, you never should have gotten involved. You're fucked. This is completely unwinnable. Like, that's kind of where they're at. And then they still stayed in Vietnam and let tons more people die, knowing that, like, their goal was impossible. So then when it got leaked, people were like, cool. Which, you know. So, the Pentagon Papers were a classified Department of Defense study titled The Report of the Office of the Secretary of Defense Vietnam Task Force, and it was commissioned by the Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in 1967. So at that point, it had been 12 years in Vietnam, I believe, not 15, sorry. They aimed to document the United States' political and military involvement in Vietnam going from 1945 to 1967, because even though the Vietnam War, I'm pretty sure it started in 55. Oh, my little timeline thing is over here. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it started in 55. We were like involved there and trying to spread democracy from much earlier than that. It was 7,000 pages of top secret documents. So I was wrong. It wasn't hundreds of pages. It was thousands of pages. And it revealed that the administrations from Truman to Johnson had misled the public and misled Congress about the scope and objective of U.S. involvement in Vietnam. So it was like, we've been lying. Things are going terrible. We should not be here. They disclosed covert actions such as secret bombings in Cambodia and Laos and active participation in the overthrow of the South Vietnamese president, I think it's now Din Diem. And apparently Diem was like, I think it was his brother was like running a lot of stuff and killing a lot of people, and there was a lot of religious discrimination and a lot of violence. So I'm not going to be like, oh, he was like a slay rock star leader. He also like was like, we're not going to have elections anymore. I'm in charge. Like, he was not the one that I'm going to praise, but like, technically that was our ally and you overthrew him. That's not a good look either. Like, I don't think anyone was right in that scenario. And the documents showed the document showed that the U.S. government continued to escalate the war despite internal doubts about its winnability. So again, no president wants to be the guy that's like, I give up, we lose, we're going to leave Vietnam. So everyone was like, let me just kick this can down the road and the next fucking guy can deal with it. So they just stayed there and kept fighting, knowing it's an unwinnable war and like the shit's fucked. And then just being like, oh, well, I don't want to look like a loser. This is why I know in today's current climate, this is the last thing anyone wants to hear. But this is why I'm not against presidential terms being longer. Because, like, it's so hard to get stuff done and win an election in such a short amount of time. Like, I don't like that they can be reelected. Like, I think they should have a longer term and, like, one election. Like, once you become the president, you're never campaigning again. Because I think presidents having to run for their second term makes them be worse presidents. As opposed to if they were just, like, in there to do their job and then retire. And then I think, like, once you're president, you're done. Like, that's, like, you've peaked. What else? Perpetually sick of this country. I first learned about this in college and was fuming and shocked by the other students didn't want to flip tables. Laser Linda, thanks for subscribing. That's nice of you. So yeah, we just continue to escalate the war. So Daniel Ellsberg was a former military analyst and he worked on the study and he decided to release the papers because he was like growing in his anti-war sentiment. Like the protests were working on him is what I'm trying to say. In 1971, he secretly photocopied the documents and provided them to the New York Times. So 4 years after it was written, but we're still involved in the Vietnam War. So I could see why he got in this headspace because he's like, okay, like I wrote that shit for you 4 years ago and like you're still here. Where was I? So it began publishing excerpts in June of that year. He believed that the public had a right to know the truth about the government's actions and deception. The Nixon administration quickly sought an injunction to stop the New York Times from publishing further excerpts, citing national security concerns, and this went to the Supreme Court, and this is often referred to as the Pentagon Papers case. The Supreme Court ruled that the government had not met the burden of proof for prior restraint. I don't really know what that is, but I think it's basically like they couldn't prove that it was so confidential because like I guess it wasn't. So this affirmed the right of the press under the First Amendment. The ruling allowed the New York Times and other newspapers, including the Washington Post, to publish the Pentagon Papers. Daniel Ellsberg was charged under the Espionage Act, but the case was dismissed in 1973 due to government misconduct, including illegal wiretaping and evidence tampering. Perfect. Ellsberg's actions inspired future whistleblowers and remains a symbol of moral courage. And in 2011, the U.S. government officially declassified and released the full report to the public. So yeah, that contributed to people hating the government, as it would. And so even amid all of this scandal, what did the most damage to public trust was Watergate. I have a stream about Watergate. I think I actually have two because I remember the first one flopped and I wasn't prepared. Shocker. So you get it. You get why people don't trust the government. You get why people believe the government is lying to them. The government is out to get them. The government doesn't care about its citizens. Because I want to be cool enough to be arrested under the Espionage Act. I'm scared of that. I'm scared of being arrested. I don't think I would do great in prison. I think I would really, really need to be charming and very funny. Because, I don't know how to... I'm not a fighter. It makes me very unsettled and uncomfortable. I don't think I would do well in there. And, like I said, I stayed at someone else's house last night, and their ceiling fan was different than mine, and I was like, oh. So, imagine that kind of an energy getting arrested for the Espionage Act. You know what I mean? Saturn Cat, thank you for subscribing. So if you don't know what Watergate is, it's literally like, I could see you doing fucking great in prison, to be honest. I really think like either one of two things would happen. Either I would not be okay, it would be really bad the whole time, or someone with a lot of power would think that I was like really funny and just like kind of like having me around. Because that happens to me at pretty much every job. Like either it's really horrible, or someone in charge is like, she's funny. And then like my life's great because I get favoritism on everything. And those are like kind of the only two lanes that I have. So anyway, Watergate, if you don't know what this is, like I said, it's a whole other stream of mine. But in June 1972, a group of men hired by CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President, this is Nixon's re-election committee, broke into the Democratic National Headquarters in the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. That's why it's called Watergate, because it's a big-ass building. It's like a hotel and a mall and offices. And that's where the Democrats had their national headquarters at the time. And not only did they break in, they broke in multiple times. They had a bunch of wiretaps. The whole thing was like pretty much an entire shit show. I think it's HBO that had the show White House Plumbers, but it was very, very good and very informative. So the break-in and attempted bugging were only part of their illegal activities under CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President. And they were considered dirty tricks conducted by the Nixon administration and his Committee to Re-elect the President. I don't like change or confrontation, but I thrive in routine, so I think I would be fine. That's one thing that I will say. I really, really need structure and routine. And one thing that I'm very good at is like carving out moments of like things that are nice for myself within a routine. So like, even if I'm in a situation where like I am like not doing well and things are bad, like I'm good at like finding little ways to find enjoyable moments. So like when I've had like jobs, I know you can't do this in prison, but I'm just giving you an example. When I've had like jobs that I really hated, I'll like go out of my way to like go find a good spot that's like quiet and peaceful that I can sit out on my break and like eat something I like or watch something I like, you know. So I think like that part I could handle better than most people. Like a lot of people would get bored, and I'm not someone that gets bored like super easily. I also really love working out. So like I think that part I would be okay. I think like the social part is the part that would be very hit or miss. I think I would come out of there looking absolutely snatched though, because I am kind of a picky eater. That's one thing that I can pretty much bet on. Maybe I'd learn how to French braid my own hair. Please don't get imprisoned, but if you do, let the people you've already know you got a mugshot. That, like, unironically is one of my favorite pictures of myself. I think it's really cute. Also, I really need to, like, speed up. I'm getting way too distracted. So anyway, no solid proof demonstrated that Nixon ordered the illegal activities, but he did engage in the illegal cover-up to avoid scandal. Scandal wasn't really avoided, my friend. But again, this made people really distrust the government. I'm going to skip this video just because, like... Then there was like an 18.5-minute gap in the tapes that were from the tapes being recorded in the White House. Like, it was a lot. And for the record, that is not a mugshot. That is my teacher credential photo from Florida. Okay? I feel like you'd make smart jokes to the guard and that would make you funny. That's what I mean. Like, I think that'd have to be my path. Because I've talked about this on here before, but I talked to a friend about this and I talked to my fiance about this, and they both said, like, I wouldn't talk to anyone. I would just mind my own business. And I was like, yeah, for you, I think that's the path. I don't think I have that luxury. Like, I think I have to come in. Hey! Like, I don't think I have a choice. Oh. We'll watch this one. It's only 4 minutes. That's still kind of long.
On June 17th.
Actually, you know what? I'm over Watergate. So I'm over Watergate. I want to talk about things that we haven't talked about before. So the Nixon administration received another blow in the fall of 1973 when Vice President Agnew had to resign because apparently he had taken bribes back when he was the governor of Maryland. I had no idea about this. I did not know that in the midst of Watergate, the vice president had to resign. I didn't know that. I did not know that. So, He was the 39th Vice President of the United States, serving under Richard Nixon until 1973. Before he was VP, he was the governor of Maryland, and before that, he was Baltimore County Executive. He was known for his sharp rhetoric against the media and conservative appeal to the silent majority voters. So again, like very much laying the foundation of today. I just got a double ad, and I know that this section is going to be on the game too. I haven't even looked at the game. My assistant made the game this week. So during his second term as vice president, he became the subject of a federal investigation for political corruption. The allegations were that he had accepted bribes and kickbacks from contractors during his time as the Baltimore County Executive and Maryland governor, and even while serving as vice president. So what a kickback basically is like, let's say I'm the Maryland governor. As the governor of Maryland, I'm like, fucking parks and roads. We want to build parks and roads. Hell yeah, man. So I call my friend Craig and I'm like, hey, Craig, I fucking love your parks and roads. As the governor of Maryland, I would like to hire your company to build parks and roads, and we will pay you with taxpayer dollars because that's the government and that's how it works. They hang up. Yay, business deal. Fast forward a couple hours. I'm the governor. I'm at a party. I see Craig. Craig, what's up, my friend Craig? I love Craig. And then Craig is like, thanks so much for hiring us to build parks and roads. I just wanted to give you $10,000 as my BFF. And I'm like, that's such a kind gift from you. I will take it. That's a kickback. So like the $10,000 doesn't go to the parks and roads. It goes to me to be like, thanks for giving me all this business with your government position. Another subscriber, Bean, are you trying to make me say something sexual? It's always my fear. Bean Kai Muff Mo? Whatever. We need to gather more scandal on our current admin. A sex scandal is not enough. I love a scandal. Except when it hurts real people. Other than that, I love a scandal. So anyway, where was I? The investigation was about bribes. The payments reportedly continued into his vice presidency, where he was getting cash delivered in envelopes at the White House. So I didn't see anything about him working with criminals, but getting cash delivered in envelopes to the White House doesn't scream legitimate business to me. It just simply doesn't. So the investigation was led by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland in cooperation with the Justice Department and the IRS. The IRS is in charge of taxes. They're very often involved in these things because a lot of times when people make money illegally, they don't pay taxes on it, and not paying your taxes is a pretty big charge. So it's an easier way for them to put them in jail rather than connecting them to a crime in the more social sense. So he initially denied wrongdoing and framed the accusations as politically motivated. It's always politically motivated. As evidence mounted, they offered him a deal. He would resign and plead no contest, which is different than pleading guilty. It just means you're saying, I don't have anything to say about that. On one count of tax evasion in exchange for avoiding jail time. So phenomenal fucking deal. You're getting cash delivered in envelopes to the White House and your only charge is tax evasion? And you don't even go to prison? Duh. So he resigned his vice presidency and entered this plea in federal court. He was the second vice president to resign after John C. Calhoun in 1832, who resigned for political reasons, which I vaguely remember, but not enough to explain it right now. His resignation shocked the nation, particularly because this happened during Watergate. So you see why no one trusts the government. Why would you? So he was fined $10,000. He had 3 years of probation, and he was disbarred from practicing law in Maryland. After his resignation, he largely withdrew from public life, but he wrote a memoir called Go Quietly or Else, where he defended himself and criticized the media and the political establishment. So then, Gerald Ford became the vice president. That's how we got Gerald Ford. I did not know that. I literally just did not know that. So now Gerald Ford is vice president. It's during Watergate. Things are crazy as hell. Like, a news cycle is going fucking insane around this time. So let's talk about the 25th Amendment.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. or seemingly mundane part of the
Al
Constitution,
Capone stares at
the 25th
injustice.
Amendment has seen a lot of use since its ratification on February 10th, 1967. The 25th Amendment contains 4 sections. Section 1 says, in case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. That's fairly straightforward. Before the ratification of the 25th Amendment, there was controversy about whether the vice president would merely inherit the powers of the president until a new election would be called, or whether the vice president would actually become the president. Section 1 made it clear that the vice president actually becomes president. But what happens when the vice president dies or is removed from office? Section 2 of the 25th Amendment says, whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall then take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress.
So that's how Ford became vice president, because Agnew resigned, so then the president just picks a new guy, I guess. Or gal. Probably not, but maybe.
This actually happened on October 10th, 1973, when Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned after having to face charges of bribery and evading income taxes. President Richard Nixon nominated Gerald Ford to serve as vice president, and his nomination was confirmed by Congress. On August 8th, 1974, President Nixon himself would resign due to the Watergate scandal.
Yikes.
And Gerald Ford, thanks to the 25th Amendment, would take his place as president and nominate Nelson Rockefeller as vice president, who would be confirmed by Congress. Section 3 of the 25th Amendment details what the president must do when he or she cannot fulfill their duties. The president simply sends a written notice to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
This is good to know. I know it's boring.
Then assumes the office of acting president, not president, until the president indicates in writing that he or she is again capable of assuming the duties of office. Presidents
so
Ronald
that's
Reagan
like
and George W.
They have to write that letter. So let's say I'm president and I have to like get surgery. I'm going to be put to sleep for 2 hours, but like I should be fine. I have to write a letter to like the heads of Congress and be like, I am going to be dead for 2 hours basically, so VP's in charge. And then once I feel better, I write a new letter being like, I'm good. And in that situation, they're not the president. They're just assuming the roles of the president. So if like our country got like attacked, like they would be the ones like being like, send the nukes. Like it's like fucked up. I shouldn't laugh, but that's what would happen.
W. Bush both used Section 3 when undergoing surgeries. Finally, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment indicates how the vice president and a majority of the cabinet can remove a president from office.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Once this is done, the vice president assumes the office of acting president. To reverse this status, the president simply has to submit a written declaration that no disability exists. You can see a potential problem with this.
Yeah.
The president might think that he or she is perfectly fine, but the vice president and a majority of the cabinet might disagree. If so, they have 4 days to transmit a written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. It takes a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress to find the president unable to discharge the powers and duties of office. If they can't reach the 2/3 majority, the president remains in office.
Ugh, this
but
seems kind of
the
hard, you
president and
guys.
vice president
I'm not
are
feeling too
probably
hopeful.
not on speaking terms. That's all for today's podcast. 60
That's
Second
not a
Civics,
podcast.
where
But that was like good to know.
Civic-
I didn't know enough about the 25th Amendment. So October 1973, the president was interfering with the Watergate investigation when he fired the prosecutor assigned to the case. And then the U.S. Attorney General resigned. And then the House of Representatives began the impeachment hearings, which led to the transcripts of the Watergate tapes. There was an 18-and-a-half-minute gap. Yada, yada, yada. We've probably learned this before. So basically, Nixon was going to be impeached, so then he resigned instead. So Gerald Ford became the first unelected president in U.S. history. So if you feel like we don't live in a democracy right now, I'm with you there. But I can see why people felt that way at this time too. Like, Gerald? Who the hell voted for Gerald? Nobody voted for Gerald because, again, people voted for Nixon and Agnew. Agnew resigned, and then Nixon resigned, and Gerald Ford's like, hey, I'm just here now. And at this point, it's only like a year later. He's only been VP for a year. Very, very chaotic time. I would not be having a party in the USA. So there is a rise of new conservatism. I don't know how the fuck the Republicans maintain so much like public favor with all the scandals going on. I guess people really, really, really hated the hippies and the civil rights movement. So the jarring social and economic changes of American life in the 1960s and 70s disillusioned many liberals and perplexed the already weakened left. The left was very weak at this time. They did not have like a strong, like I said, this really reminds me of today. The left did not have a strong like thing that they were for. Like they weren't like, we're against the Vietnam War, that's wrong. Like they didn't have a super strong like stance at the time. Like, so people were like, kind of, what are you doing? Because like the Republicans are a shit show, but like, what are you? You're nothing. Do something. Do anything is the vibe that I'm getting. So, moreover, it proved the right opportunity for, it proved the right, sorry. Moreover, it proved the, it provided the right, so the right, more Republican leaning, it provided the right with the most important opportunity in generations to seize a position of authority in American life. So the right-wingers and the Republicans are becoming way more powerful, even though they're also really doing a lot of illegal things, which I guess is how you get power, unfortunately. So the Sunbelt. The Sunbelt is what we're looking at right now. It's hot there. That's why it's called that. So, one of the most widely discussed demographic phenomenons of the 1970s was the rise of the Sunbelt, states in the Southeast and the Southwest. So again, like California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, like just the southern part of the country. By 1980, the population of the Sunbelt was rising dramatically to exceed the older industrial regions of the North and the East. Part of the reason that this happened is because of air conditioning becoming more affordable and more prevalent. Before air conditioning, most people did not want to live in a hot ass fucking place, so more people lived up north. But as technology got better, cars got better, air conditioning got better, more people were moving to more parts of the country. So it's just kind of like the economic and technological conditions about why that happened. So, a strong populist tradition in the South and the West helped produce opposition to the growth of government and resentment of the proliferating regulations and restrictions of the, quote, liberal state. So in this area, people have like a pretty strong anti-government, anti-regulation sentiment. Because keep in mind, like, what's happened in this area historically. Out west, you have the people that, like, chose to go out in the middle of nowhere where there was no government. And, like, a lot of them really disliked the government and didn't trust the government and were, like, historically, like, ranchers and farmers and things like that. And then in the South, think, like, everyone's still mad about the Civil War. I know it was over 100 years ago at this point, but people were still mad about it. So there's, like, a really deeply embedded dislike of like up north, because a lot of people out west feel like that's the bad place that I left, that I couldn't build a life and it was so hard and I came out here alone and worked, and it's like rugged and very rugged individualism, like I don't need the government to help me, I can do it by myself. And then the South is like the government, or like the Southeast, like still anti-civil rights, anti-northern post-Civil War sentiment. It's like I hate the North, this controlling government. So they weirdly, even though they're very different, end up at the same place a lot. So many of those regulations and restrictions, like environmental laws and restrictions about what land you can use for what, because you're like not supposed to farm on certain land is residential versus commercial, things like that, they affected the West more than any other region. I don't really know why that is. I'm kind of curious about it now. So this is called the Sagebrush Rebellion. This was in the West in the late 1870s. It mobilized conservative opposition to environmental law and restrictions on development. Oh, I guess it affects the West the most because that's where the most government land is owned. So there's more laws about like you can't build here, you can't do this, you can't do that. This is a Time magazine. It looks like it, I guess, is from this time. Don't tread on me. An inside look at the West growing rebellion. So this was a political movement that called for more local and state control over federally owned public land. Because again, in a lot of these Western states, a lot of big portions of land are owned by the federal government. This was led primarily by ranchers, miners, and loggers and other land users. A land user. That's a very specific title. A land user. And all of those sound like ways to make money to me. They were frustrated with federal land management policies and restrictions. So basically, they want to exploit natural resources, and the federal government is making it difficult for them to do that. So this movement got its name from the vast arid sagebrush landscapes of the American West, where conflict over land was most intense. The rebellion was sparked by growing resentment towards the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service. I loved in White Lotus, I'm not spoiling anything, where he's like, oh, I worked for the BLM, and she just thought he meant Black Lives Matter for days. That's so funny to me. So Western states like Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico were especially affected because a large percent of the land is federally owned. In Nevada, 80% of the land is federal land. That's a lot. Many Westerners believed that the federal government was mismanaging the land and preventing economic development through excessive environmental regulations. So this is making them really Republican. So the movement's supporters demanded that the federal government transfer ownership of the public land to the state governments, and they opposed environmental protections like the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, which they believed hindered land use for grazing, that's like cows, mining, logging, and recreation. Not anymore if Trump sells it. That's what I was telling y'all. This is very, very relevant to the right now times. The rebellion also called for reduced federal oversight and more local input in decisions affecting land use, water rights, and resource development. So the Sagebrush Rebellion gained momentum during the presidency of Ronald Reagan because he voiced sympathy for the movement in the 1980 campaign. Reagan appointed James Watt, a supporter of the rebellion and a critic of federal land regulation, as Secretary of the Interior. Secretary of Interior means you're in charge of inside the United States. So literally you're in charge of this. Despite political support, no significant federal land was transferred to state control, but the movement influenced the direction of federal land policy during the Reagan administration. So this is very much like the rise of limited government conservatism that I think we very much see today, but even now they're kind of getting away from that. It's getting weird. So environmental groups, many indigenous tribes, and legal scholars were against this rebellion. And again, it's not so much a literal rebellion as a political thing. They argue that public lands are a national resource and if they're managed well, they benefit all Americans. And critics also noted that the state governments lacked the financial resources to manage the public land responsibly. They don't have the staff to go out there and make sure it's safe and protected and clean and when there's natural disasters and things like that. Legal challenges reinforced the federal government's constitutional authority to retain and manage public lands under the Property Clause. This faded in the mid-1980s, but it laid the groundwork for future anti-federal land movements such as the Wise Use movement in the 1990s and modern land rights activism. The ideology still resonates in contemporary debates over land use, especially in the West, where this is still a contentious issue. And more notable modern examples influenced by the rebellion's legacy are the 2014 Bundy standoff in Nevada and the 2016 armed occupation of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. So, people out there are upset. They feel like the government owns all this land. They feel like the government's too big, the government's too powerful. Suburbanization also fueled the rise of right-wingers and the rise of the right. Not all suburbs breed conservative politics, of course, but generally speaking, suburbs tend to be more right-wing than left-wing. This is not always the case, but it very much is often the case, especially out west. One of the most militantly conservative communities in America was Orange County in Southern California, which is mostly suburbs. Orange County is extremely, extremely, extremely conservative, which I know seems so odd because it's right near LA, but Orange County is very Republican. So,
once upon a time, Newark was a white city. Department stores like Bamberger's and Hanes catered to white.
This video is kind of long.
Once upon
Sorry, we're behind. So, the tranquil life in the suburb contributed to a conservative view of the world. And conservative literally means to not make many changes, to keep things very like boring and plain. So these are the people that they saw the civil rights movement and they were like, I don't really like that. I don't really think we should be making that change. They saw the women's liberation movement and they were like, nope, bad idea. Women stay home. That's how I'm using the word conservatism right now. There was also a religious revivalism period. Revive means like to come alive again. So this means people are becoming very, very, very religious, specifically evangelical Christianity. This I don't know a ton about. I'm excited to learn about this. I'm literally reading this for the first time. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so like, I don't even necessarily feel stuffy. It's just like dry. So evangelical Christianity emphasizes a personal born-again conversion experience, and they believe the authority of the Bible is the literal word of God. They have centrality of Jesus's death and resurrection for salvation, and the importance of evangelism, the spread of the gospel. So I guess that's what makes it different than regular Christianity, is like the born-again, like, oh my God, I feel it. I guess. So they differ from mainline Protestants who often accept modern biblical criticism, endorse social gospel activism. So a lot of the Protestantism was like in favor of like the temperance movement, and like which was banning alcohol and things like that. And they do not always insist on a literal interpretation of scripture. Like I know in today's time, a lot of Protestants are like open to gay marriage and think that like things can be interpreted in different ways. And evangelicals, I think, do not think that. They're like very like, this is what it says. This is what it means to me. So they're typically theologically conservative, holding traditional views on gender roles, sexuality, and the authority of scripture. They often reject scientific consensus on evolution and climate change. And that's the thing that I've heard Protestants say a lot, is I've heard some Christians who are not evangelicals say like, oh, well, I believe in God, but I believe in evolution as well. I think God is so powerful. God could have created a world with evolution. Like they, it seems like, are a little more go with the flow is the best way I could describe it. So evangelicals tend to distrust central authority, including the federal government, and often believe that secularism, which is like not being religious, liberalism, and moral relativism are threats to Christian values. That I very much see. I grew up evangelical, and when I tell you it's not for the weak or science-minded people by myself. Me watching Real Housewives of Orange County and thinking which one of y'all are Trumpies. A lot of them are Trumpies. I think Shannon is, Vicky definitely is, because she's talked about it before. I don't know if they're like current Trump fans, but I know they have been Trump fans at some points in time. A 1976 Gallup poll found that 34% of Americans identified as born again or evangelical Christians. That number has been rising sharply in the 1970s and into the Reagan era. This is another thing I might want to do an entire stream about, like the rise of this, like why and how did this happen? So Jerry Falwell was a Baptist preacher from Lynchburg, Virginia. Lynchburg is a crazy ass name. Like what do y'all like to do for fun? I don't think I want to know. He founded Liberty University in 1971 and the Moral Majority, which was explicitly created to mobilize evangelicals as a conservative political force. So that's the thing, is that evangelicals, it seems like from the jump of their rise, were very, very, very political in nature. Pat Robertson, a Pentecostal minister, launched the Christian Broadcasting Network and later founded the Christian Coalition, which helps fund conservative causes in GOP campaigns. Francis Schaeffer, an intellectual evangelical theologian, I know how to say that, but my mouth won't do it, wrote How Should We Live?, which warned of moral collapse caused by secular humanism, that's us, and inspired more evangelicals to engage in politics. So evangelicalism has been deeply intertwined with politics for, at this point, over 50 years. Right? Is that math right? I think it is. So, where was I? Billy Graham avoided overt partisanship, but gave cultural legitimacy to evangelicals through his global crusades. He counseled multiple U.S. presidents, but became very wary of politicization. Is he still that way? Is he alive? who's Billy Graham? Like, I know that name, and I know he's like a Christian TV person, but I don't know anything about him. Organizations like focus on the family, promoted traditional family values. They're against sex education, against LGBTQ rights, they're against abortion, and they are a major political influence. So the right is becoming more religious, more anti-science, more powerful, more organized, and better funded. Scary. So political influence and alignment with the Republican Party. Evangelicals shifted from political disengagement to fierce political activism, specifically after Roe versus Wade and when mandatory prayer in school was ruled to be like unconstitutional. They really, really did not like those things. Although they were previously aligned with both parties, they started to see the Republican Party as the defender of their cultural values. This is how the Republican Party became the evangelical party. And like I said, because people started hating the government, so more people are joining for that reason. The moral majority claims to have registered 4 million new conservative Christian voters. And the moral majority, their whole thing is like, we're the majority and we have the moral stance. And their view of morality is like hating gay people. Like, that's kind of their shtick. Where was I? This was in 1980, so this really contributed to Ronald Reagan's election. And by 1980, they had developed national fundraising and mailing networks. They were a major political donor bloc, especially for anti-abortion, anti-equal rights amendment, and pro-prayer in school candidates. So very much like similar vibes to what we see today. Like, this is the groundwork, this is their blueprint, this is where it's all beginning. And this is where I start to see like mandatory prayer is actually, in my opinion, government overreach. So is it a small government that you want? So they begin framing cultural and moral issues about abortion, gay rights, feminism, and pornography as a battle between good and evil. So rather than it being a discussion of politics, because this is what I hate about being a person in 2025, when I say I love talking about politics, I mean politics. I do not love talking about morality. And they blurred the lines between politics and morality. And they created a conversation where people now believe and think that the government's job is to police morality, when that was never the government's job, in my opinion. Because the way that I try and think about politics and what my true view is, because y'all know, like, I'm very in favor of women's rights. I'm very in favor of gay rights. I think all these people should be protected. But when I try and put myself in these people's mindset, is like, you don't actually want to talk about politics. You're not talking about a specific policy. It's all about hatred and government control over people you hate. Because, like, even if I try and put myself in the mindset of like, oh, I think these people are evil, I think they're gross, I think they're wrong, I still struggle to empathize with this political view, because I'm like, even if I did think these people were like wrong or evil or bad, I still don't think it's the government's job to police that, even if I personally thought it was wrong. You know what I mean? Like, what's something that I think is wrong? Like, I think that people who lie to their spouses all the time about where they're going and what they're doing, I think that that's wrong. Like, I think that that's immoral and that's wrong. Like, I think it's wrong to have a relationship with your spouse where you are lying all the time. I think that's wrong. I think it's immoral. I do not think it's the government's business to intervene in that in any way. You know? So that's why when I see this, I'm like, I'm trying to understand, and it's literally just like, you just hate people. Like, to me, it literally just comes from hate. So they have created this political battle where, like, one side is good and one side is evil, and that has really, in my opinion, still been the tone and only gotten worse. So it also, the TV was a big factor here. So evangelism, the TV preachers, people should be allowed to be gross and evil to a certain extent. Like, it comes to when you start to, like, harm other people. So anyway, this became a massive industry in the 1970s and 80s. By the mid-1980s, some evangelical ministries were bringing in $100 million annually, much of it from small donor contributions from loyal viewers. Pat Robertson's CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network, generated enough revenue to launch a university, a political action committee, and an international media empire. So this is why the Republican Party is very loyal to these people, because the leaders of these churches are getting hundreds of millions of dollars and then putting it into political causes and basically control all these people that believe everything that they say. So naturally, the Republican Party became their bitch. They've invested money. So the Christian Broadcasting Network, the Trinity Broadcasting Network, and others gave evangelicals 24/7 platforms to promote political and theological views, circumventing traditional media. Because going on television, if I go on ABC, they're not going to let me say certain things. But on Trinity Broadcasting Network, you can say whatever the hell you want. No, the majority of this does not pay any taxes because it's considered church. It's considered like the church owns it, so they don't pay any taxes on this. Yeah. Living, laughing, and loving. Evangelicals pioneered direct mail political fundraising. They helped launch influential political action committees like the Faith and Freedom Coalition, and they used religious messaging to raise millions of dollars from middle-class donors. So they very much operate, from what I've seen, in like a fear-based mentality. Like, people are going to come for your children. There's going to be days that like, this is legal. And y'all have seen the anti-gay, the anti-trans, like the racist talking points of the right, with like the fear-mongering and all these things. So that's how they get the money. They really coax these people in with fear of change, fear of the government, a victim mentality. Everyone hates us. We're so oppressed. We have to stick together. Like the God-fearing. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions that humans have. So, even though they're on the rise, lots of their prominent figures fell into scandal. Jim Bakker was convicted of fraud and served prison time for misusing ministry donations, an estimated $158 million. Jimmy Swaggart, that sounds like a fake name, admitted to sexual misconduct in 1988 and lost most of his empire. Oral Roberts famously said God would call him home if he didn't raise $8 million in a fundraising campaign, which led to media ridicule. So critics accuse them of hypocrisy because they manipulated people with fear and guilt for profit, and they lived extremely lavish lifestyles with like the clothes and the cars and the private jets and the houses. Despite the scandals, many of their audiences remained loyal, interpreting criticism as spiritual persecution from the secular media. Because again, they've created this narrative where it's like, those people hate us, they're out to get us, we're the good people. So then when I'm saying that and I get criticized, I can be like, see, I told you they're out to get us. See all these nice things I do for our community, how they're coming after me. And I'm being attacked because I'm so good and they are the evil ones. Like it's so much manipulation that goes into it. Group psychology and group manipulation is insane. So, by the 1960s, traditional mainstream religion experienced a conspicuous decline. So the more traditional religions are going down while evangelicism is going up. So like religiousness is starting to become politicized. I think especially like before the 1960s, even though the church has always been political, and like even look back to like the Church of Britain and the King and all that, like the church is always political. I think in America it started to become political in a very unique way around this time, in a very partisan way. But in its place began this powerful religious revival of evangelicals. So some of the new religious enthusiasm outside of evangelicalism was in unorthodox faiths like the Church of Scientology and the Reunification Church of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. I don't know anything about that. I know a little bit about Scientology. This is Scientology.
Scientology is probably the most successful new American religion of the last 100 years, and it is spread through every corner of the world. The 1950s
lock the doors.
were a time of enormous anxiety for Americans. We were talking about space travel and alien worlds. We were starting to get to know how the mind works for the very first time. All of these things fed into Hubbard's imagination as he began to create Scientology as a religious movement. Here are 3 things that Scientologists believe. Number one, that we are all eternal souls trapped within bodies, and that we've had multiple bodies over many, many lifetimes.
Leah Remini,
Number
we
two,
need you.
in each of these lifetimes, we have gathered trauma, whether we're aware of it or not. And number three, the way to get rid of these traumas, to clear yourself of them, is through the process called auditing, a kind of technological exposure therapy.
What is it that you have your attention on a lot?
Through a series of courses and auditings, you become more and more aware of your true nature. You have more and more control over yourself and your world until you reach a kind of godlike status. People who are familiar with Scientology are mostly familiar with the scandals, the control that the leaders of Scientology have over the lives of many of its members. Scientology is at a crossroads in its history. If the church can learn to give up some of that control, in 100 years from now, it might be one of the great religions of the world.
He's like, guys, be open. So Scientology becomes a thing. So even the tragic People's Temple, I don't know if you know about this. This is in Guyana in 1978. I think this is what the Jonestown Massacre is another name for it. This was a mass suicide at a jungle retreat. It was, again, like very cult, like a very, very cult vibes at this time. I worked for someone who was ex-Scientology and someone who was still actively in it. It was wild. Is Scientology only in the USA? I have never heard of it in Europe. I think it's predominantly in the USA, but I do know that they have been other places as well. There's a girl on TikTok that escaped from the other religion she mentioned. She calls it the Moonies. Oh, I think I have heard of that. Another good idea for a stream. Therapy for all your trauma from the dead people and for a small cost of $100,000. Yeah, so you have right-wing, like, evangelicalism going up and being attached to the Republican Party. You also have, like, some more cult religions becoming popular. So then, like, a lot of the general public is kind of like, I'm good off of religion for a while.
Jim Jones?
Jonestown's too depressing.
Jim Jones?
I can't do it. But the most important religious revival, like I said, evangelical Christianity. It's growing the fastest, it's growing the most intensely, and it is quickly becoming the most political. They have a common belief in a personal conversion through direct communication with Jesus. So these are the people that are like, I pray and I hear Jesus talking back to me. I have personally never had that experience, but if you have, rock on, rock star. I love that for you. To be honest, kind of jealous. To be honest, maybe we think about whose voice that was. Maybe we think about how powerful group psychology and a cult-like leader can be. But if you like it, I love it. So that's kind of their vibe. Evangelical religion became the dominant form of Christianity for much of our history. So it's very like American in our culture. It's in everything about us. In its modern form, it became increasingly visible in the 1980s with the TV preachers like we talked about, to which have attracted even international audiences. By the late 1970s, evangelical Christians had become more visible. Sorry, I keep burping. And much more politically assertive. More than 70 million Americans now describe themselves as born-again Christians. Christian evangelicals own newspapers, radio stations, magazine, television networks. They have schools. They have universities. Religious universities are like a lot. When I was finding a grad program, I like accidentally was at a religious one, like on their website. I didn't realize it was religious because it like they do offer the real credential that the government accepts, but like I just didn't realize it was religious. So I like emailed them and was like getting more information and finding out about the cost and stuff. One, it was expensive as shit. So fucking expensive. And then two, they were like, oh, and we can teach you like how to lead your classroom with Christ. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I was like, one, I didn't realize y'all were down with that. I'm not down with that. And two, why is this a part of the state credentialing? Like you could, no. Would you do a Chrisley deep dive? Have I not? I think I have. I'm like 80% sure I have. I'm a Christian university survivor. And then I'm in a Facebook group for like the teachers in my area, and they were talking about this program, and I was like reading the comments, and someone was saying that someone posted and they were like, hey, is this school's like program good? Should I do it? And a couple people were like, yeah, it's good, but it's really expensive. I did this other one and I liked it a lot better. And then someone in the comments said that like they did it and it was super easy, but they got a 90 on every paper because apparently the rubric they use there, 10 points are for like Christianity. Like 10 points are for Christianity. And they were like, I could never figure out how to get those 10 points. Like I don't know what I was doing wrong to this day, which I thought was crazy. So Christian universities give cult. 3 modern presidents, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush, have identified themselves as evangelicals. So it's very much in the mainstream politically as well as religiously. Some evangelical Christians have supported racial and economic justice and world peace. The first peace march was led by Jesus. From what I've seen, this is not the majority of them, but they are there. Every once in a while, a teacher performatively prays in the classroom and it winds up on my FYP. I hate when people tell you their religious institution isn't really religious. No, literally, because like it's fine. They're like, oh, it's a Christian school, but it's like barely even Christian. Then why'd they make it a Christian school if it's not Christian? Why is it Christian? You know what I mean? For many evangelicals, the message of the evangelical religion was very different, but no less political. In the 1970s, they became, like I said, very active politically and culturally. We know all about the girl, Phyllis Schlafly, America's #1 traitor, in my opinion. They were alarmed by what they viewed as immorality and disorder in American life. So they didn't like that people are having sex before they got married. They didn't like that, like, at this time, very, very early gay rights, like so early, like not even gay rights at this point, but like gay people are here ? And they did not like that part of it. Even very against like women working more, but poor women have always worked, like very against the kind of social progress. Many evangelical men and women feared that feminism posed a threat to the traditional family, and they resented the way that the government policy advanced the goals of the women's movement. So things like the Equal Rights Amendment, Equal Pay Acts, things like that. Roe versus Wade, having more access to birth control and things like that. Particularly alarming was the Supreme Court decisions eliminating religious observations in schools and the decision guaranteeing women the right to health care of abortion. So like I said, those court cases were a very big deal to them, and they call themselves the moral majority. By the late 70s, the Christian right had become a powerful and political force. Jerry Falwell, like we said, had this highly visible moral majority movement. Pat Robertson, we kind of already talked about some of this. So some denied scientific doctrine, and they wanted schools to teach the Bible and stories of creation. So very, very much a lot of what we're seeing today of this being pushed into schools, and this is hilarious to me. I wish I could show you, but I don't want to unplug my computer. Those exact desks are sitting in my office, like right there. They're literally like, I'm like almost reaching them right now. But the idea that prayer should be in school, Bible should be in school, Christianity should be in school. And the part that's interesting to me about this is like, they say that the roots of this go back to like small government, but no one's stopping you from sending your child to a religious school. No one's stopping you from sending your child to a private school. There are many schools that teach the Bible at school. There are many schools that do not learn evolution, that they learn the story of creation in science class. That is offered in many homeschool curriculum. I've seen that offered in private schools, in church schools. I've seen that offered places. Their like deep passion to get it in public school is what is deeply fascinating to me. Their new goal was to get an era where Christian values dominated American life. So these and other organizations of the Christian right oppose federal inference with local affairs. So again, like, you're against federal inference in local affairs, but you want the federal government to mandate that the Bible be taught in schools. Question mark. They denounced abortion, divorce, feminism, and homosexuality. They defended unrestricted free enterprise, so low regulation on business, and a strong American posture in the world. So very militaristic, low regulation on business, high regulation on people. What's even crazier is when you realize the Bible was a giant burn book. Like, we need to keep making them. It was just anti-government rants. So Mormons also began to emerge as an important element of the right as well. For many years, Mormons did not publicize their conservatism. Mormons very much kept to themselves for a long time because they were really prosecuted because of the whole polygamy thing. Like, that's why they were in Utah. So the Mormons also, I saw a Book of Mormon, like they're touring, and I saw the Book of Mormon recently. So fucking funny. But anyway, like the Catholics, many Mormons began to take conservative stances in the 1970s on some of the controversial battles of the time. So they experienced rapid membership growth. They went from 2.9 million to 4.4 million in just 10 years, and they had significant international expansion during this time. The 1970s is also when they started allowing not white people because they were like, oh, we want more power, we want to expand. We'll take anybody now. Like, racism canceled. Keep going. The LDS Church expanded their missionary force, growing to 25,000 missionaries by the end of the decade. Those are the people, they come to your house in twos and knock and talk to you. That's who that is. They have a ton of money because they require tithing. That is where you give some of your money in the church. The church also owns a ton of real estate investments and a ton of business ventures. They make tons of money in Utah. They basically dominate Salt Lake City. In the 1970s, it was one of the wealthiest religious organizations in the world. So key holdings during this period include Beneficial Life Insurance, Zion's Bank, multiple Utah-based newspapers, and vast agricultural operations, and one of the largest cattle ranches in the country. So the church owns a ton of shit, and I guess they don't have to pay taxes on any of that. Fucking cool for them. I grew up with the evangelical Christianity BS and could still never understand if God is so capable, why he couldn't have created evolution. These people are determined to be ignorant in my observed opinion. Thank you for saying that. Because that's how I've always felt. Like, if your God is so powerful and so cool, you think your God couldn't have made a Big Bang? You think your God couldn't have made evolution? You think your God couldn't have done, like, all these things? You think your God didn't have their hand on science when they were making birth control? Like, if you think God is all-knowing and God is all-powerful, then wouldn't God be in everything and everyone? Maybe I'm taking it too literally as someone who wasn't raised religious. So they also became much more politically engaged. They were against the Equal Rights Amendment. That was partially Phyllis Schlafly, because Phyllis Schlafly was, I believe, Catholic, and she was like, we cannot just stick with the Catholic women. We got to go after the Jewish women, the Mormon women. She was like, let's get everybody in this bitch. So they were strongly mobilized against the Equal Rights Campaign. They said it threatened traditional gender roles. They remained officially nonpartisan, but more and more of their views are becoming right and Republican. Many LDS members supported conservative Republican candidates. There was a rise in Mormon political figures such as Orrin Hatch, who was elected to the Senate from Utah, and LDS members began making large political donations, especially to anti-Equal Rights Amendment campaigns and pro-life organizations and school prayer advocacy. In 1978, they made a historical doctrinal change by lifting the ban on priesthood for Black male members. So they are becoming much more like racially, I don't want to call them diverse, but they're making some improvements in that area. This was because of divine revelation. They were like, God spoke to us and told us to let in everyone now. But also because they had expanded the church into Africa and Brazil. So, like, they needed leaders for all these places where, like, it's mostly not white people. So if you can only have white leaders, like, that's going to be kind of difficult to expand into Brazil and Africa. You know what I'm saying? So, but God told them magically at that time. Some of these Mormons were very, very wealthy and successful businessmen. They became politicians in various parts of the country. Like we mentioned, a couple senators. Also, I think Mitt Romney is Mormon. Speaking of Mormonism, I don't think you can see it anymore. Like, I can see it, but I don't think it'll show up on camera, and I can't lift my leg that high. I have a scar on my leg from when I was 14. I was taking AP Human Geography, and we had to do a project about religion, and we had to pick a religion out of a hat, and I picked Mormonism, and I made, like, a big Mormon temple and then put Mitt Romney on top of it. And yeah, I burned myself, but I think I got an A, so worth it. And the scar is just now gone, and that was over 10 years ago. So anyway, The Catholic Church also began making a strong case for tradition. The church fought most zealously against abortion. So that's what I mean when I say, like, the right has been working against abortion since the day Roe versus Wade passed. Like, they literally did not waste a single moment. Like, the left, after Roe versus Wade passed, like, sat back, put their feet up, and relaxed, and was like, oh, I think we're good. No. This is one of the most controversial issues of the time. The pro-life movement formed rapidly after the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973. The National Right to Life Committee was actually founded even before that in 1968, and they expanded after Roe versus Wade, which was the largest pro-life organization in the United States. They had over 3,000 local chapters. And let me give you like some context. So like whenever the Supreme Court rules, it's always based on like what's constitutional, what is the legal basis for this? Is there any precedent for this? What's the legal basis for this? And Roe versus Wade, the ruling actually had nothing to do with the actual procedure of abortion, with the actual procedure that is life-saving in many cases for women. It had nothing to do with like safety or morality or anything like that. The reason Roe versus Wade was passed is the Supreme Court said that it is protected under the right to privacy because as a medical procedure, it is considered a private matter. So under the same kind of legal idea that like you have to have a warrant to go into someone's home because you have the right to privacy. You have the right to privacy in your doctor's office. That was the basis of the ruling. It wasn't anything to do with reproduction. It wasn't anything to do with the number of kids being had. It wasn't anything to do with them not wanting certain people to have children. Well, like some people that was there. But the Supreme Court, I'm saying, it was a legal basis of people have a right to privacy. So that was what the basis was. But obviously the pro-life movement doesn't really care about that. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, evangelical Protestants mobilized the moral majority. They joined this cause. They shifted the movement into a broader religious conservative coalition. They strategically built legal and lobbying arms like the Americans United for Life, which crafted model legislation used by states to restrict abortion access. So this is literally the way it works, is that, so let's say, let me like get my little pen and paper and explain this to you. So I am a congressperson. I'm pretending. I would never do this if I was elected to Congress, but I'm an evil congressperson. I'm being Congress. The evangelicals and the Mormons, they gave me millions and millions of dollars during my campaign. They gave me millions of dollars and they're like, you're going to do what we want. You're our guy. Like, you're our congressman. Here's your millions of dollars. So I get elected. Yay! They look at me and they're like, hey, here's the law we wrote about abortion. Go ahead and propose it and pass it. Okay, thank you. And then I go pass it. So that's how a group of people who is anti-women's health care and against a woman's right to choose, which is a minority, the vast majority of Americans are pro-choice, but this is how a minority group politically has been able to pass these laws all over the country. It was through money and the rise of conservatism in the 70s. Like, that's what it goes back to for them. The movement coordinated with the Republican political strategists, and they used abortion as a core issue in elections. The GOP adopted a pro-life platform in 1980 because Ronald Reagan openly supported the movement. So by the 2000s, pro-life organizations have a multi-pronged strategy. They have state-level legislation like ultrasound mandates and things like that. So I think a friend of mine did have this procedure and told me about this. I don't remember what state it was in. But she told me that basically they had a mandatory ultrasound, so she had to get an ultrasound. So she had to like go to her doctor. Her doctor had to refer her to a provider that provides this service. That provider had to do a mandatory ultrasound, and then she could get the procedure. I think it was 72 hours after the mandatory ultrasound. So she said also because they had like a pretty early ban, it was like very tough, but she said the doctor's office was like so helpful and took her after hours and everything just so they could do it like as fast as possible. But yeah, all of these creative and slimy ways to block women from getting the healthcare that they need. They also have the crisis pregnancy centers. So these are basically fake doctor's offices. They have like ultrasounds and some like light medical equipment, more like a midwife would have. And they are called crisis pregnancy centers. So a lot of people go there who are in a crisis and pregnant, but then they actually just give a lot of misinformation about abortion. One of the most common things that they tell women that is possible, but not the case for the vast majority of people, is that if you have an abortion, you will not be able to have children afterwards. And that the majority of women regret it, which that is objectively false. All the data tells us the majority of women do not regret it. So yeah, that's what they do at crisis pregnancy centers. They just make your crisis worse. Misleading name. So there's Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, Students for Life. Tons of these groups, their long-term goal was judicial appointments, appointing judges. Because again, they do not care about what's popular. They care about getting done what they want. And they know that a lot of times these laws about women's health care go in front of a judge, not the voters, a judge. So they're using their political connections and all their money to try and impact who becomes a judge and put in pro-life judges. Again, they've been doing this since the 1970s. They spent over $52 million in the 2020 election cycle. That's awesome. So through alliances with groups like the Federalist Society, pro-life advocates have influenced appointments of conservative justices like Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. These efforts culminated in the 2022 ruling that overturned Roe versus Wade. As of 2025, is this a Project 2025 crossover up? So the anti-women's healthcare thing is a part of Project 2025, but it is also much older. So I'm kind of talking about it in an indirect way. 21 states have enacted total or near total abortion bans, with several others implementing 6-week to 15-week bans, which was directly enabled by the pro-life legislative groundwork. So exactly, I'm dumbass congressman. Pro-life groups literally hand me the bill and say, go pass this. They're the ones writing the laws. They absolutely are. Look up the group called ALEC, A-L-E-C, I think. The annual March for Life continues to draw hundreds of thousands of participants, and the pro-life movement is now a key voting bloc in Republican primaries, influencing everything from judicial picks to presidential platforms. I think this is long. Start at 5:21. Okay. My assistant made this, if you can't tell. Well, not all the slides, but she picked some of the YouTube videos and did the research part.
Protestantism has been a driving force in American politics for decades, especially through groups like the religious right. Jerry Falwell, a major figure, founded the Moral Majority in 1979, aiming to bring evangelical values into the political sphere.
We certainly put millions of people at the polls because of the president's commitment to a pro-life agenda, to strong national defense.
This group significantly shifted the Republican Party's platform, playing a key role in getting Ronald Reagan elected in 1980. Today, Protestantism continues to shape voting patterns. Evangelical Protestants, known for their conservative views, are a reliable base for Republicans, especially in the South. Meanwhile, mainline Protestants who often hold more moderate or liberal views are more likely to vote for the Democrats. Protestant beliefs also influence debates about separation of church and state in the US. The government is expected to be neutral regarding religion, yet religious expression in public life is allowed, sparking ongoing debates over religious freedom with avoiding government overreach. Looking ahead to the 2024 election, Christianity, particularly evangelical Protestantism, will play a pivotal role. Donald Trump remains popular among many evangelicals for his stance on religious freedom, his conservative judicial appointments, and his role in overturning Roe v. Wade.
They are coming after me because I am fighting for you.
On the Democratic side, Kamala Harris may face challenges appealing to religious voters due to her pro-choice position.
Do you not trust women to know what is in their own best interest?
Democrats are trying to connect with faith communities by emphasizing social justice, immigration reform, and economic equality. As both parties vie for faith-based voters, these religious groups could prove decisive in shaping the 2024 election's outcome.
And they
With
were.
changing demographics and evolving views on faith, the ongoing relationship between religion and politics could once again define America's future direction. Thank you for watching, my friends. If you'd like to watch more videos on religion and
So that was depressing. Now I wish we hadn't watched that. Okay, so super, super trigger warning. This is deeply offensive. There's many slurs in this, but these are offensive tapes from the Nixon era that I think do a really good job of showing how, like, intentional the rise of the right was and how truly, like, calculated it was. And one statement I've said before, but, like, I just feel it so much. Like, the right is playing chess and the left is playing, like, Uno. Not even checkers, Uno. I have not listened to all of this.
The Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade in January 1973, removing most restrictions on abortion. President Nixon told his special counsel, Chuck Colson, that even though he believed abortion encouraged permissiveness, it shouldn't always be out of the question. In another of the candid and sometimes coarse conversations released today, the president muses about anti-Semitism. He's talking to evangelist Billy Graham and worries about reaction to the Washington visit of Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, because Israel has just shot down a Libyan passenger plane.
Anti-Semitism is stronger than we think, you know. It's unfortunate, but this has happened to the Jews. It happened in Spain, it's happened in Germany, it's happening, and now it's going to happen in America if these people don't start behaving. It may be they have a death wish. You know, that's been the problems with our Jewish friends for centuries.
Yikes.
Well, they've always been, through the Bible at least, God's timepiece, and He has judged them from generation to generation, and yet used them, and they've kept their identity.
I know this isn't fun to talk about, so thanks, Redacted. I know it isn't, but we really need to.
President Nixon, ruthlessly pragmatic, justifies the Christmas bombing of Hanoi as necessary to break the deadlock in the Paris peace talks.
We all know that this whole, almost hysteria about the bombing has been a media created thing. Totally. But when you come down to it, the bombing is over. We're going back to the table, and we're going to have an agreement.
South Vietnam's president, Nguyen Van Thu, feared the peace deal would be the end of South Vietnam. Alexander Haig reported to the president.
He basically feels he's been screwed. He knows he has no alternative. And he's going to come along. He told me he was.
They bleeped goddamn different time.
Not ours this time.
The recordings Richard Nixon intended for his own use continue to tell history his uncensored story, with thousands of hours yet to come from the Nixon Library. Bill Plant,
They are God-fearing men. I want them to be more afraid. I want them to be much more afraid. So, new conservatism and the emergence of the new right. So, religious issues were only part of what became as the new right, which we've been talking about this whole time, that had rapid growth in the 70s and 80s. It began to take shape after the 1964 election. Let's talk more about, like, the politics and what I was saying of, like, how organized they are, in which Barry Goldwater suffered his shattering defeat. Energetic organizers responded to the disaster by building a new and powerful set of right-wing institutions that helped conservatives campaign more effectively in the future. Part of their partnerships with all the churches, because again, we're going backwards a little bit back to the 60s. So beginning in the 1970s, because of these organizational advances, conservatives almost always were always better funded. A lot of that money coming from churches, and were always more organized than their opponents. That's why they've been so politically successful. By the late 70s, there were right-wing think tanks, which is like the people that are like, what's our agenda? What's our goal? The people that are like, all right, which judge seats are up for us to take away a woman's right to choose? There's consulting firms. Consulting firms can be a variety of things. They can consult a candidate about the way they talk, the way they speak, the way they dress, the way their laws are written, whatever. Lobbyists. So let's say I work for a pen company. I'm a pen lobbyist. I go to Congress and I convince Congress people to pass laws that are good for the pen company. Lobbying is a very real and I think kind of necessary thing for our political system. Often is very evil because some groups like teachers, there's lobbyists for teachers, but there's also lobbyists for like oil companies and plastic companies, and those ones have the most money. So, and a lot of lobbyists will then run for things or work for elected officials. It's like a revolving door. It's really just not good. My boyfriend's dad was just telling him to join a think tank. I don't like, do you get paid in a think tank? Like, I'm kind of, I know what they generally are, but I'm kind of unclear about how they work. So, Ronald Reagan, one of our least favorite people. Ronald Reagan emerged in the late 60s and early 70s. He was once a very successful actor, and then he moved into politics in the 60s, and in 1964 delivered a memorable television speech on behalf of Goldwater. After Goldwater's defeat, Reagan worked quickly to seize the leadership of the conservative wing of the party. So again, very conservative, very, very religious, me being a public ed lobbyist. Thank you. Tell them I would like some stuff done. In 1966, with the support of a wealthy conservatives, he won governor of California 2 terms, and his political star rose dramatically. So all these like rich church business people are like, here's some money, we want you in charge of the bullshit. This is his speech about Reaganomics. Trigger warning, Reaganomics. Okay, hurry up.
Good evening. I'm speaking to you tonight to give you a report on the state of our nation's economy. I regret to say that we're in the worst economic mess since the Great Depression.
Yikes.
A few days ago, I was presented with a report I'd asked for, a comprehensive audit, if you will, of our economic condition. You won't like it. I didn't like it. But we have to face the truth and then go to work to turn things around. And make no mistake about it, we can turn them around. We invented the assembly line and mass production, but punitive tax policies and excessive and unnecessary regulations, plus government borrowing, have stifled our ability to update plant and equipment. When capital investment is made, it's too often for some unproductive alterations demanded by government to meet various of its regulations.
You're just saying words.
Excessive taxation of individuals has robbed us of incentive and made overtime unprofitable.
Okay, I'm like kind of over this. Like I'm overhearing his voice. I don't want it. So the Southern strategy, like how earlier I was talking about how the Sunbelt grew in size. This is how they're taking advantage of that. So this was a Republican political strategy from the late 60s through the 80s to gain support among white Southern voters. Because the South, white people in the South were, by this point it was kind of over, but they, for the vast majority of U.S. history after the Civil War, hated Republicans because Republicans were the ones that ended slavery. Republicans were the ones that were fighting the South. Republicans were the ones that did Reconstruction. So a lot of elderly people have historically hated Republicans. So now the Republicans have realized, all right, it's been like it's now been 100 years since the Civil War. Most of those people are dead, or all those people are dead. They forgot about that. They don't care about that. So they're like rebranded, and now they're using the Southern strategy. This emerged as a response to the Democrats being in favor of civil rights. Because remember how I said in the 70s, the Democrats kind of like didn't have a thing they were doing because like civil rights, the legislation hadn't been passed, and they were just kind of like in their flop era, which is still ongoing. So anyway, under Lyndon B. Johnson, a lot of white voters were upset about the civil rights legislation. They were upset about federal marshals being used to enforce civil rights legislation. And so Republicans started using coded language. You often hear this called a dog whistle. So like a dog whistle is like super quiet. It's like a quiet way to be like racism. To appeal to white voters who were against federal civil rights measures. They were against desegregation. They were against busing, which is busing children to different schools, without explicitly using racist language. This strategy aimed to flip the Democratic solid South. The Democrats called it the solid South because they were like, we'll always win the South. The Democrats always have the South because they hate Republicans. But again, now it's been 100 years, so people are kind of forgetting about that. Not to say that I was like on the South side in the Civil War. I just kind of mean it set the tone for a long time. The South had voted blue since the Civil War, and they wanted to turn it into a Republican stronghold. So they started emphasizing issues like law and order, states' rights, and opposition to big government. Barry Goldwater was one of the earliest figures to use this approach in the 1964 campaign. He voted against the Civil Rights Act and won 5 Deep South states despite losing nationally. So even though Barry Goldwater never won, he was the beginning of the South becoming Republican, and the South becoming, especially the white South, becoming very reliably Republican. So Nixon and the codification of the strategy. Richard Nixon adopted and refined the Southern strategy in his 1968 presidential campaign by positioning himself as the law and order candidate in response to civil unrest and the perceived failure of liberal policies. This is also when we start to see more, not in 68, but further on, more in like the drug epidemics and things like that. So Nixon campaign courted disaffected white voters, often referring to them as the silent majority, people that were uneasy about civil rights reforms, urban riots, student protest, and cultural liberalism. So kind of the things that I talked about a couple weeks ago with all of the pro-civil rights stuff, the anti-war stuff, the summer of love stuff. They're going after the voters that are like, oh, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I don't really like that change. He avoided overtly racist language. Overt means obvious. So if someone says something like a racial slur or I hate X, that is overtly racist. Covert means like kind of covered up on the low, crime in the streets. You're not even technically saying a person. You're just talking about crime in the streets. It's more vague. And opposition to forced busing. This appealed to white backlash voters who resented federal intervention in local race issues, because a lot of white people in the South did not like that they saw federal troops coming in walking black children into their white schools. So like, it's all just so interconnected and it's so interesting to me. My throat is so dry. So Kevin Phillips, who is a Nixon strategist, famously explained the plan. I'm going to change some of the language here. The more Black Americans who register as Democrats in the South, the sooner the Black American phobe whites will quit the Democrats and become Republicans. So this is what I mean. The Republicans are playing chess. They're like 5 steps ahead. Nixon's use of the Southern strategy helped him win the presidency in 1968 and even more decisively in 1972 when he carried 49 states, including every former Confederate state. The Southern strategy contributed to the realignment of the U.S. political map. This shifted white Southern voters from the Democratic Party firmly to the Republican Party over the course of several decades. While Black voters overwhelmingly remained loyal to the Democratic Party, white Southern Protestants and working-class whites increasingly identified with Republicans on positions of race, religion, and patriotism. Critics have argued that the Southern strategy institutionalized racial resentment into modern conservative politics, because it's kind of like them, like, when you use racism to gain power, your power was built on racism, so you have to continue to perpetuate racism to maintain your power. And to get more power, you have to perpetrate more racism. So, like, that's a criticism. Yeah, I think we can all agree drugs won the war on drugs. Where was I? It also paved the way for controversies over welfare, affirmative action, crime, and immigration. The strategy also influenced Reagan's campaigns, which emphasized the welfare queens. The original welfare queen was a white woman. States' rights, notably in his 1980 speech in Philadelphia and Mississippi, the sites of civil rights murders, and tax revolts. In 2005, the Republican National Committee Chairman Ken Melham publicly apologized to the NAACP for the GOP's use of the Southern strategy, admitting that it had been a deliberate appeal to racist divisions. I mean, a 2005 apology that was never acted on, and 20 years later you're still doing that. Not really an apology to me. The long-term effect has been a racially polarized electorate where white voters, especially in the South, tend to vote Republican, and voters of color lean heavily Democratic. So, the next clip, you've probably heard it if you are into this kind of learning and have learned about this subject before, but it is a rare and candid hot mic moment from Lee Atwater. He is a Republican political strategist who was very famous and very powerful at this time. This interview was in 1981. He had just transitioned from being a top GOP operative in South Carolina, where he masterminded aggressive and racially charged campaign strategies, to a position of national influence within Ronald Reagan's White House. So, important fucking guy. He was interviewed by Dr. Alexander Lamis, a political scientist who was conducting research on the political realignment in the South. The interview was not recorded on video. The transcript was published posthumously and has since become one of the most striking admissions of how racially coded language became central to the Republican electoral strategy. He describes a key feature of the Southern strategy, a long-term Republican campaign to attract the white Southern people that used to be Democrats, and especially after the Civil Rights Movement. So, trigger warning, he does use racial slurs in this clip. Like, it's horrifically racist. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by that, but here goes it. So he lays out how they can win racism without sounding racist.
It's a statistician or a political scientist, or no, it's a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, now y'all aren't quoting me on this, you start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger, that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights and all that stuff.
So he's basically saying in 1954 you would just be overtly racist, but in 1968 that's kind of taboo, so that's when we started saying forced busing, states' rights. And this interview is in 1981, so this is him reflecting over the last 10 years of political changes that you and I just discussed.
And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying
the quiet part literally out loud.
Abstract and that coded that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously, sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
So yeah, that is a kind of random hodgepodge of some of the political changes and political things happening in the 1970s. This is why I cringe when people say they're fiscally conservative. To me, if someone says they're fiscally conservative, that means I'm easy to manipulate because you got manipulated. As a black person, it's so hard because things like this should change the way that we operate, but they just don't. It's crazy to me how long we've known about this and how they're just still doing it. Like, they're still doing it in such the same ways. And that's why even though this week's stream was like very depressing and hard to talk about and like not fun, I think it's important because it's still being done in this way. And I think when you're educated on it and you see clips like that, like this hot mic moment where he didn't know he was being recording, it helps you identify these things in the future. And that's like the most I guess I can hope to do with my time on earth is like help people identify evil people that want to manipulate them to make money and power. Because it's just so insane. The newest dog whistle is just being a Morgan Wallen fan. Fiscally conservative equals sellout to me. So like I said, didn't laugh once. 10 out of 10. Yeah, for fucking real. Like, there were no memes, kind of, because I went through it and I was like, I don't have anything to say about that. Like, I truly do not have anything to say about that. But like I said, I think this is important to talk about because it really did lay the groundwork for what we see today. And someone earlier said, you should do a stream on the flip of values and demographics in the Republicans and the Democrats, because every time it's explained to me, I never get it. I could do a stream just about that, but I guess like the TLDR version is like what I was saying earlier, that they kind of flipped because like the South was very Democrat because the Republicans were the ones that hated slavery. Well, more for political reasons than moral, but the Republicans are the ones that ended slavery, so the South really hated that for a long time. And then the new Republicans were like, oh, you guys are racist, we'll be racist too. And then they were like, sounds good. That's like the quickest example I could give. But next week will be a much less depressing time. We're going to be learning about Waffle House. Is this the era that boomers grew up in? Yes. So your boomer family members were children or young adults during this time. So let me look at the years that boomers were born. And then we'll talk about Waffle House. Boomer birth. I got my nails taken off and I feel so free. So boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. So they were children and young adults during all of this. This is when they are becoming politically aware beings, which makes a lot of sense. Would you ever do a stream on the privatization of education? Probably not a stream, but we would do a podcast about it. So feel free to email the podcast if what did I just kick? If you want to talk about that. It's teacherquittalk@gmail.com. My boomer grandparents were born in the 40s and raising my parents in the early 70s. Yep. So, where was I? Waffle House. So we are going to talk about the history of Waffle House, how they were created, how they expanded, all of that. But one thing I really want to talk about is like, they are literally ready for the apocalypse. They have their own like emergency weather system. They never fucking close. They can have no power and no water and still open. Like, it's just a fascinating thing. And then as a teacher, one thing that's also fascinating to me that we're going to talk about. Oh, our podcast is anywhere you listen to podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, it's on a bunch of them. So at Waffle House, the way that they communicate their orders is basically you take the Waffle House plate and the server arranges like the jelly and butter to mean certain things. And part of that is because a vast portion of their workforce is being exploited because they cannot read and write very well. So Waffle House has figured out that by creating systems that do not rely on literacy, they can have a very, very exploitable workforce. Because if you do not know how to read and write, you are much easier to exploit. That's just a fact. So they're like, I don't want to say they go after people that can't read and write, but they've created a place of employment where reading and writing is not a barrier to entry, and reading and writing is a barrier to entry at many places of employment. So once you're in a place of employment and you don't know how to read and write, you would have a lot of fear and not be able to like leave and all, because you're like, oh my God, I can work here and make a little bit of money, and if I leave, I'll make no money, and like, it's just a lot. Are we going to watch that video of the Waffle House employee slamming a flying chair out of her face? Possibly. So some of the Waffle House things we learned will be good vibes, and some of them will be bad vibes. Yep, it's picture matching. So it's like if the jelly is here, that means the eggs are fried. If it's here, that means the eggs are scrambled. So like you don't have to read a ticket. So yeah, so interesting. So Waffle House will be like kind of history, kind of sociology. Like there's just like Waffle House lets us observe so much of our culture. So much of American culture is prevalent through the Waffle House. And I have been known to enjoy a meal there. We really are relying on Waffle House after defunding the National Weather Disaster Services. God, that scares me. Let me pull up our little frickin' Nearpod. Let me look at it and double check that it's right before we do this. But I hope that you all, I don't want to say enjoyed this, but I hope that you found this to be very, very educational. Oh, the game is kind of hard. Y'all would be kind of mad. You'll be okay, actually. I think it's not that bad. Oh, of course, now it won't fucking save. There we go. It wanted me to X out of their chat help that I never opened. Every website has been getting progressively worse over the last 5 years, and I'm sick of it. I'm getting so many pimples, too. It's so unfortunate. There's our little frickin' game. Starbucks rolling out the picture menu because of employee illiteracy, allegedly. Can you please send me that? Like, if you saw an article or a Reddit post or a tweet, can you please send it to me? To my email, a Walmart parking lot with 2 T's @gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with me. I'd seen that they're giving us a new point of sale system. Is this the alleged reason? This is fascinating to me. Let me set up you guys' game. Let's do space, because I don't want to be on land anymore. It's too depressing down here. I don't want your email. I don't want you to make an account. You don't have to download anything. This is just a fun little game for us to play based on what we talked about. You can do it on your phone. Like I said, no downloading, no account creation. It is going to ask you your name. If you don't want your name to come up on the screen, put something fun. If your phone autofills your name, move slow. Be careful. And yeah, it's just about what we learned tonight. I saw a TikTok about it. If anyone sees that TikTok, can you like tag me in it or email it to me or something? Dun, 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 dun. Oh, I hate that I'm like stuffy right now. If I order Waffle House takeout to eat during the stream, will the negative content completely turn me off dinner? I am not going to say yes or no because I haven't made the slides yet. So, like, for me, I would say no, because for me, what would stop me from eating it is if something was, like, dirty or gross, and I'm not going to talk about that, because even though Waffle House treats their employees horribly, I tip the Waffle House employees very well, so that's how I've rationalized that to myself, because, like, I literally usually tip 100%, because it's so cheap there, so, like, so like I would probably still eat it, but if you're like really sensitive about like spending your dollars at corporations, like maybe not, then maybe I'm a bad person that I could like still enjoy the potatoes, but I could. A lot of people have been buying stuff from me on Teachers Pay Teachers recently. That's cool. Y'all getting ready for the year already? I'll give people a few more moments to join. The directions are on the screen. Like I said, you can do this in another tab. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on an iPad. It'll tell you, like, download our app. You don't have to. Get your bag, Mr. Redacted. Yeah, for real. Someone asked me, like, oh, why do you never do brand deals? I'm sure you get them all the time. I do not. I am not very brand friendly, and I think this is why. I think because I've been very, very outspoken about the violence against the Palestinian people and how I think that it's wrong. I think that's why a lot of brands are like, yeah, we don't want to go anywhere near that with a 10-foot pole. It's also just like the economy right now. A lot of companies are downsizing their marketing departments. A lot of companies are not spending money on brand deals with content creators, which is like really understandable. And I have always felt like I would much rather promote something that I made than a product that someone else made, especially like a lot of the products I see a lot of my, like, I guess you'd call them colleagues, like other teacher content creators posting. A lot of them to me are just like so consumerist. Not the people, but like the products themselves. Like they're just so niche and random and things that in my opinion are not actually needed. So to me, like, I would much, even though it's more work to make money through like Teachers Pay Teachers and things like that, to me, it's a lot more sustainable because, like, one, I don't have to deal with anyone else. I can do it whenever I want. Like, I'm not reliant on a company deciding they want to spend money on me. Like, I can post a new thing if I want to post a new thing. And then two, I also just feel like it's much more authentic because it's something that I made. Like, I'd rather be talking about something I made than something somebody else made. It's just kind of the way that I see it. Shout out to Vicky Waffleson. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit start. It is a slim night tonight. I haven't been promoting the stream at all. Oops. Right after I get off of here, I'm gonna make a video about how the Waffle House system is created to get around literacy. Can we circle back to the desk in your room? Yeah, I use them for little skits that I'm making. I just got them. I'm very excited about it. I got them on Facebook Marketplace. I did not get them from school. I was gonna try and get them from school, but I was like, I just don't even wanna have a 1% chance of getting in trouble. Because we were getting rid of a bunch that were broken, and I don't really care if it's broken. If anything, it being broken is funnier. So I was gonna ask, but we've had so much admin turnover that like sometimes things don't get communicated correctly. So I was like, it's highly possible someone could say yes when someone else said no. And then when I found some on Facebook Marketplace, I did have to drive like an hour and a half away each way, so 3 hours total, to get them, but they were very cheap and they were exactly what I wanted. And I was like, I'll just feel better knowing that like if someone tries to come after me, I literally have like the conversation of me agreeing to meet with this person in the middle of fucking nowhere and paying them. Like I have like the Cash App receipt, like I bought these fucking desks, you know? Sorry, I keep getting distracted from you all. I say as I go to open another window on my computer. Oh, you guys asked about stand-up dates. I'm about to post them. I will be in Kansas City on the 24th. I will be in Tulsa on the 25th, and I will be in Little Rock on the 26th. All of those are of July, just in a couple of weeks. And I need to put all of that in my link tree. Oh, I still haven't asked me anything on there. Oops. Oh, there's a bunch of stuff in there. I guess I can do another Ask Me Anything, but that stream didn't do well. Y'all were not into that. Like, no tea, no shade on you. If you're not into it, it's fine. But I guess I should delete that. I've, like, not been a very good misredacted recently. I've kind of been slacking. Y'all are also focused on the game. I told you this game is hard. My assistant is strict. Whenever she makes the game, it's hard. She's very strict. Okay, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Stand-up tickets. Nope, not the Nearpod link. Definitely not the Nearpod link. I'm like so ignoring y'all so bad right now. Sorry about that. There we go. Damn it, Reagan. Sorry, I'm making a meme for Instagram. It's gonna be good though, trust. Alrighty, Saturn Cat in first place, a Dutch Bros parking lot, Dr. $5 Phillip, Jimmy No Swag, Linda, a Tammy Faye makeup bag, Ava, a Reagan, Abby, an iPhone parking screen, Ivis, Lizzie Beth, a Winco parking lot, Vicky Waffleson, Elliot, a corrupt court case, that 70s parking lot, Megan, Miss Hill, Reagan, like Bloody Mary. Nice job, nice job. Any memes, anything to add? Thank you so much for being here. I kind of before this was like, I really don't want to talk about this stuff. I was like, this is so fucking depressing. Why did I decide to talk about this? But I think it is important to talk about, and you'll make everything enjoyable. Like even when it's depressing, it's still in a way enjoyable because it feels productive to talk about with you all. The entire Nixon admin and creep act writer draw 25. Oh. Incredible. I'll give people a few more moments to add their memes, but I am going to get out of here shortly. I'm itchy. That was tough. It was a tough one. I told y'all, my assistant is strict. She's strict on that game because she's like a genius. Like she's like super smart and like gets good grades. So sometimes I have to be like, we're stupid. Like you need to bring it down. Thank you for your service, Miss Redacted. Of course. Of course. I can't meme. This is such an insane theme. That's so valid. Yeah, so let's call it there. I love you all so much. I will see you next week to talk about Waffle House. It will be much less depressing and more just like interesting society things. Thank you to everybody that subscribed. Sarah Shashidi resubscribed. Let me make sure I got everybody. I think I got everybody. If I didn't get you, Saturn Cat resubscribed, Laser Linda subscribed, a Dutch Bros Parking Lot subscribed. Thank you to my subscribers. Thank you to my followers. If you happen to have Amazon Prime, it is free to subscribe to me. Like, you get a couple freebies on there. That would be a really cool, nice thing to do, because if you like me, you like me. If you want to give it to someone else, that's also understandable. To all my Love Island watchers, please enjoy. I respect your culture immensely. I'm not a part of it, but I have a feeling one day I will be. Yeah, so enjoy the island. Love you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye. See you next Tuesday. I always forget that.